to Writing 123. As promised, I'm going to give you a quick video on my system of taking notes and transferring that to an outline into your first draft or your rough draft. And I can't seem to find out how to turn off the picture-in-picture camera, so forgive that. And yes, I'm wearing my weekend hat because it's Friday afternoon. I hope you are all anticipating a great weekend. So let's get right into it. So I've pulled up some things already so that we can whip through this. But as you will have done, we're starting here at the Search Resources screen where you can access the library's tool called Primo, which we would have clicked and gone to here. And then I just was curious about dragons and whether, well, I just typed in where did the dragon myth come from, etc. And then I did filter it by peer-reviewed articles and came up with some 1,200. And I zeroed in on these two about Beowulf and the combat myth and the dragon in Harry Potter. And so I've got their information there. Now, the first thing you do with your notes, and again, this is optional. This is what I do. It works really well, but you can do whatever you want for things like your notes, obviously. But what I do, first thing is I copy and paste that bibliographic information for each source as I go. So remember, you would just go over to, you click on your source, you click Actions, Citation, and there it is, copy and paste, which I already did. And then also you can go and view these articles, which I've already done, clicked on that, and here's the one, interesting. And then you start taking your notes. And here we go. Now, what I've done here, and what I'd suggest you do, is you organize your notes by having the page number justified left, press tab, and then write your note. And again, as I've said, one of the main things you want to do with your notes is write down whatever direct quotations you think you'll be using. So I kind of picked some somewhat at random and tried to come up with a theme. I'm not really writing a paper, so don't attack the logic of my outline or paper when you see it. But so here I wrote down a couple quotes, and I here wrote, a little note to myself. He's saying that the fantasy approach is inherently different than the psychological novels approach. Interesting in reference to his argument that we ought to not use the critical tools of our time or of one time, genre, etc. on another. Does he contradict himself, etc. So those are notes to myself, but again, I try to emphasize having the quotes because you'll remember what you thought about the thing, most likely, but you certainly won't remember the direct quote, which you have to have perfect in order to use it in your paper, right? And so what you'll find yourself doing, if you just wrote down page 20, he's saying that the fantasy approach is inherently different, blah, 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 says something interesting about this or that, well, then you go to write your paper and you're like, well, now what exactly did he say? And maybe sometimes you won't need a quote, but you'll still feel like you ought to go look at it. And then certainly all those times when you need a quote, you'll have to go find that article or book again, find that page, try to scan the page, find the quote. This is the quickest, most, well, not just quickest, because that's only half the goal, but it's the most efficient, the most organized, and therefore often the method that leads to the clearest thinking and the best paper. And then here's the other article that I pulled up, The Combat Myth and the Gospels Apocalypse in the Harry Potter series, a version of a supposed existential given. And he uses a particular theorist to put the Gospels, or the narrative of the Gospel in general, specifically the interaction of love and violence, in conversation with the Harry Potter series, etc. So I kind of picked a quote from the beginning here. Now, leave that aside for a second. Let's say you go through your sources, you've read what you think is going to be most useful, and you've read efficiently. What I mean by that is, and yes, I'll give you all the tips that I would use if I were writing the paper. Let me take a quick breather here to tell you about this. Well, for example, in grad school, I had to write probably, depended on the semester, anywhere from a minimum of 50 up to maybe 75 or 80 pages worth of papers every semester, okay? And so also at the beginning, I Well, by the second semester, I in addition to teaching and tutoring and things, I ended up having to take second jobs, waiting tables in a Mexican restaurant 4 nights a week till midnight, these sorts of things. And so I, was set on finding the efficient ways to do good work. And this is it. But where I'm going is, for your reading, you cannot read absolutely everything. Now, later on in your, writing, whether for your career or other things, there might be some things that you need to read everything for. But for your average paper in college, you need to be efficient with what you read. And so let's say that you're going to use 8 sources and perhaps look at 10 in order to write this paper. Well, some advice was given to me that I found very helpful. Once you have an idea of your argument, not just your topic, but your argument, well, then you can zero in on maybe the 2 or 3 most important articles or books to be familiar with, right? There's a number of ways you can do that. After you've gotten your annotated bibliography, you're skimming through some things. You might look at their bibliographies or works cited. You might see what things get mentioned a lot and then look at those articles. Or you might just simply find the ones that are most closely related to the specific argument that you're making. At any rate, you come up with three things. And those are the 3 that you read most thoroughly, perhaps. And maybe only one of those will you just really read through, mark up, print it out or something, or notate on your computer and know it backwards and forward. This is the primary argument that you're either writing against or that you're kind of writing in response to or parallel with and agreeing with some, whatever. You go in depth in one and then become pretty familiar with the other 2, and then you, in varying degrees on your little pyramid of reading depth, almost skim some of the rest to find the relevant parts. Certainly look at the table of contents if there is one of the article or book, look at the abstract, and ruthlessly be efficient with your reading time. Doesn't mean be ignorant of what's out there at all. And so use this tip like like a loaded firearm, sparingly and only at the right time. But the point is, you can minimize the time, well, the wasted time that you spend reading. Not that any time spent reading is wasted per se, but certainly for the purpose of finishing your paper. Okay, so you've got some notes here. Now, you've already made an outline. Well, you now in real life, okay? But you can make your outline basically after you've read and gone through your sources to some degree. Again, I've made this up. But then how do you go from here to drafting? This is another key part of the system that I'm kind of giving you here. And if I come up to the 10-minute mark, I'll stop it and do a second video to continue this. Well, you've begun to sketch out your argument here. Dragons in medieval as well as 20th century high fantasy literature are not merely symbols. They are, real concrete things out there in the world that the hero has to deal with, and this has implications or whatever. Okay, well, as you're going here and you're breaking this down, remember you have a hierarchical argument. It's broken up into different parts. This one isn't perfect, but you say that this one particular critic says that though Tolkien might have overdone his job, he was going for a balance, blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, I said something about that. This one may or may not totally relate to that. But guess what? Beauty of copy and paste. You can go in here. I try to keep it in line with the rest just because why not? Sometimes I'll do different colors, things like that. The main thing is that visually you can kind of see what you're doing here. And he always says something about this too. And I know this because, of course, I kind of tailor-made this outline for what I had already found for quotes. Okay, let's put this one in here. So what I'm doing is I'm putting my notes even, certainly quotes that I really do think that I'll end up using. I'm putting those right on in. Maybe I'll do it like this so it's clear. Right on in to my outline. Now what does this allow you to do? Well, first of all, if you do this, I've already said this in the text of this this week's assignment. Okay, we're coming up on 10 minutes. I'm going to pause. Hold on, we'll be right back.